claim that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein had discussions within the Justice Department about potentially removing President Trump under the 25th Amendment. Good evening, I'm John Scott, and you're watching The Fox Report. McCabe spoke about the reports in an interview on 60 Minutes. He says Rosenstein even brought the idea to some cabinet members in the Trump administration.
The discussion of the 25th Amendment was simply Rod raised the issue and discussed it with me in the context of thinking about how many other cabinet officials might support such an effort.
Rosenstein was actually openly talking about whether there was a majority of the cabinet who would vote to remove the president.
That's correct.
Plenty of reaction now coming in from Congress as well. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham says he plans to subpoena both McCabe and Rosenstein if they will not voluntarily agree to testify before the committee.
There's an allegation by the acting FBI director at the time that the Deputy Attorney General was basically trying to do an administrative coup, take the president down through the 25th Amendment process. We will have a hearing about who's telling the truth, what actually happened.
Phil Keating is live in West Palm Beach, Florida, near Mar-a-Lago, where the president is spending the weekend. Phil.
Yes, John, the Winter White House is occupied this weekend. A beautiful weekend of weather it was. President Trump did return about 3.5 hours ago to his Mar-a-Lago estate after spending about 6 hours again at his Trump International Golf Club. He indicated he was going to be meeting this afternoon, so that meeting already may have happened, with his trade team discussing China and upcoming trade negotiations. Big target on the Sunday political talk shows this morning, of course, tonight's 60 Minutes interview with former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe, where he talks about the time right after President Trump fired former FBI Director James Comey. McCabe says he discussed with the FBI's top lawyer, James Baker, and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein about possibly invoking the 25th Amendment to remove the president from office and even secretly recording the president over concerns about his motives with Russia and U.S. policy. Here's a clip from Scott Pelley's interview.
What seemed to be coursing through the mind of the Deputy Attorney General was getting rid of the President of the United States.
Well,
one way or another.
I can't confirm that, but what I can say is the Deputy Attorney General was definitely very concerned about the president, about his capacity, and about his intent at that point in time.
Now, according to Baker, Rosenstein also told him that some cabinet officials were also ready to possibly remove Trump from office. But McCabe himself is pushing back on how his interview is being promoted, saying things were taken out of context. Per his spokeswoman, quote, to clarify, at no time did Mr. McCabe participate in any extended discussions about the use of the 25th Amendment, nor is he aware of any such discussions. Still, Senator Lindsey Graham wants to subpoena all of the people involved right in front of his Senate Judiciary Committee.
We're going to find out what happened here, and the only way I know to find out is to call the people in under oath and find out, through questioning, who's telling the truth, because the underlying accusation is beyond stunning.
Now, the president had no public events yesterday, had none scheduled for today, but the travel pool, the media that travels with the president wherever he leaves and gets mobile, they have now been reassembled and taken back over to Mar-a-Lago. So perhaps the president will be going out tonight. We'll find out later. John?
Keep us posted. Phil Keating, thank you. White House allies and advisors today defending the president's decision to declare a national emergency to build the border wall after it sparked immediate bipartisan criticism and a flurry of lawsuits. Trump administration senior advisor Stephen Miller was on Fox News Sunday.
I guarantee you this. If Donald Trump had said he's invoking the National Emergency Military Construction Authority to build a security perimeter in Iraq or Afghanistan or around a military installation in Syria, there would not have been one word of objection from Congress. This is defending our own country.
But some Democrats say they have constitutional grounds to challenge the president's action.
The president is trying to take the power of the purse away from the legislative branch. We are co-equal branches of government, and he is trying to do a type of executive overreach that is just really uncalled for. And, you know, if he wants to appropriate more money to put more agents at the border, to put more people at the ports of entry, to go after counter-drug, we can have those conversations.
Ellison Barber rounds up the reaction to President Trump's decision live from Washington. Ellison.
John, Democrats really across the board are saying that this is a major problem. The president is taking his presidential powers too far, and the National Emergencies Act is not meant for this sort of thing.
The president has overreached. I think this is a constitutional issue.
This is the first kind of emergency we've seen like this, that a president's done this. He couldn't get the Mexicans to build the wall. He couldn't get Congress to vote the money in.
Now, among Republicans, the reaction is a little more mixed.
The Congress is locked down and will not give him what we've given past presidents. So, unfortunately, he's got to do it on his own.
We shouldn't have an executive, I don't care if it's Republican or Democrat, that tries to get around Congress with this national emergency declaration.
Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro says he plans to introduce a joint resolution to terminate the president's declaration. If they move ahead with that, it would most likely pass the House. If one chamber passes it, the National Emergencies Act says the other chamber has to bring it up as well.
Do you have enough votes in the Senate to put a joint resolution of termination on the president's desk?
I think we do. Now, whether we have enough for an override and veto, that's a different story. But frankly, I think there's enough people in the Senate who are concerned that what he's doing is robbing from the military and the DOD to go build this wall.
Sources have told me the president was warned weeks ago that if he declared a national emergency, House Democrats would likely pass a resolution disapproving it, and it would be privileged, meaning the Senate would have no choice but to take it up. A Senate aide close to leadership told me Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and others warned President Trump an emergency declaration could split the Republican Party, and the resolution may end up on his desk, forcing him to issue his very first veto.
He's going to protect his national emergency declaration, guaranteed. But the fact that they're even talking about a resolution disapproval shows you this is a statutory issue and a statutory delegation that Congress made.
John?
Ellison Barber in Washington. Thank you.
You bet.
So as the debate rages in Washington over the president's national emergency declaration, Border Patrol officials are reporting a surge in rescue efforts on the Rio Grande. They say more migrants are trying to cross the border river into Texas, including some who've already been deported from the U.S.
Those previously removed aliens are a concern. Last week, we arrested somebody here crossing the border near that area in Piedras that had a prior conviction for murder and had been removed from the United States. So we know that's a concern when we're talking with any group, but certainly when we talk about large groups, it's an added concern.
Jackie Heinrich is live in Eagle Pass, Texas with more. Jackie.
Well, John, we could see an influx of migrants this week as Mexican authorities announced they're going to be closing a makeshift shelter just across the border where some 1,600 Central American migrants have been held now for more than 2 weeks. But the wait to get into the U.S. legally is indefinite. But no wall can be built using any military budget money until Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan decides it's a military necessity. Even with President Trump bypassing Congress by declaring a national emergency, money in the military construction budget can't be moved without Shanahan's approval. Meantime, opinions on the wall are split here in Eagle Pass. Some people are growing uneasy with the increased law enforcement, saying it feels unnecessary.
I think using the word crisis that's not the word to use. We live here. We know there's no crisis. People have been crossing borders since borders have been, invented.
But other Eagle Pass residents are getting tired of the migrants trying to bypass the system and putting a strain on first responders. Border Patrol in Eagle Pass says since the caravan arrived, they've had a spike in river rescues, 17 people on just one day last week.
I believe that's the route that he had to take in order to get done what he needs to do. Whatever you want to call it, whether it's an emergency or not, unless you go to the border and confront those people that want to get across, then you tell me what you're going to call it and how you're going to get it to stop.
This is also a very emotional issue for people. Just as we were wrapping up our day here, an Angel mom stopped by our live location. She had been down at the border handing out food and water to Border Patrol agents, thanking them for what they're doing. Her son was murdered by an undocumented immigrant, his body set on fire in San Antonio 8 months ago tomorrow. Here's what she had to say.
I wake up and I count my blessings, I count my children, but I can no longer count Jared. So again, it's very traumatic. It's still very heartbreaking to know that, you know, I no longer have a son, and it could have been prevented.
The national emergency is, of course, still facing challenges from the courts. John.
All right. Thanks very much. Jackie Heinrich in Eagle Pass. Heather Nauert withdraws her name from consideration to be the next United Nations ambassador. The State Department spokeswoman was President Trump's pick for the position. However, she released a statement saying it is in her family's best interest that she no longer pursue the high-level opening. Jillian Turner is in Washington with more.
Sources tell Fox News Nauert's decision to withdraw her nomination resulted primarily from concern over her past employment of a nanny who wasn't legally allowed to work in the United States. Now, if true, the nanny in question lacked the appropriate work visa required to do the job for which Nauert had hired her. The State Department hasn't confirmed this element to Fox News. They've said only that the nominating process, on top of traveling around the world and between D.C. and New York to see family, had grown to be too much. Now, this echoes what Nauert herself said in a statement. The past 2 months have been grueling for my family, and therefore it is in the best interest of my family that I withdraw my name from consideration. It's unclear whether she'll retain her role as spokesperson for the State Department or not, though a subsequent statement from her boss, Secretary Pompeo, seemed to bid her farewell. Heather Nauert has performed her duties as a senior member of my team with unequaled excellence. Her personal decision today to withdraw her name from consideration to become the nominee for U.S. Ambassador to the UN is a decision for which I have great respect. I wish Heather nothing but the best in all of her future endeavors and know that she will continue to be a great representative of this nation in whatever role she finds herself. President Trump had selected Nauert from a handful of candidates back in early December.
Heather Nauert will be nominated. She's going to work with Nikki Haley to replace Nikki at the United Nations.
As for the vacant position itself, a State Department spokesman says the president will make an announcement with respect to a nominee for U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations soon. Other nominees in the pipeline now include some names President Trump had previously considered. Among them, Kelly Craft, current ambassador to Canada, Rick Grenell, ambassador to Germany, former National Security aide Dina Powell, and John James, former Senate candidate from Michigan. John?
All right, Jillian Turner. Jillian, thank you. Presidential hopefuls hit the campaign trail this weekend. Several of the prospective Democratic nominees have been crisscrossing the country to try to drum up support. The field is already pretty crowded and could get even more packed if Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown enters the fray. He says his final decision is coming soon.
I've learned a lot of things about communities, and I've been to Iowa, New Hampshire, and we're going to Nevada and South Carolina in the next couple of weeks. Connie and I go together. We will have a timetable the next 3 weeks to make a decision.
Anita Vogel is following the candidates already in the race from Los Angeles. Anita?
Well, hi, John. You know, Sherrod Brown is in good company. He's one of about 20-plus candidates considering a run. Meanwhile, some of the declared candidates are already crisscrossing the country this weekend. Just a few hours ago, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey was the guest of honor with a group of young Democrats in Manchester, New Hampshire, a place he'll be back to many times during the course of the campaign. He told the crowd the Dems can go all the way.
The blue tsunami that came through here, electing representatives, electing senators, electing local leaders. That's how you build a party, and that's how you save a country.
On Saturday, California Senator Kamala Harris made several stops in the crucial state of South Carolina. At a town hall in Columbia, one woman asked her if she was the one candidate who could beat President Trump. She answered the question in part by saying she had the unique ability to fight for justice. But later, when interviewed by reporters, the woman said she wasn't sold, but she would continue to give Harris a chance. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar also hit the trail yesterday. In Wisconsin, she spent a lot of time defending her yes vote on the president's spending bill that includes $1.3 billion for border barriers. Klobuchar noted the bill was very similar to legislation introduced in the fall, which had overwhelming bipartisan support. But she added she did not support a declaration of a national emergency. And Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren has an event in Las Vegas today, but was also campaigning yesterday in Georgia, where she was interrupted by a heckler yelling that she lied about her Native American ancestry. He was escorted out, and she continued on seemingly unfazed.
This is my second trip to South Carolina. I'm just going to keep coming back, and I'm going to go to every community that I can get to in South Carolina and all around our country, because this is really a fight on behalf of all of our children.
So just a taste of things to come. So far, there are 8 declared Democratic presidential candidates and maybe 24 more, John, who might jump in. Back to you.
Former Vice President Joe Biden among them. Thanks very much, Anita Vogel in Los Angeles. The 9/11 Victims Fund is drying up and slashing payments. The reason why coming up. Plus, the Islamic State fighting for its last tiny pocket of land in Syria. How 1,000 Syrian citizens are making the battle a lot more difficult. A live report from the region coming up.
We've gone from thousands of troops in Iraq and Syria down now to a couple of hundred in Syria. Congratulations, Mr. President. The job is not yet done, but we've done a hell of a job destroying the capital.
The 9/11 Victims Fund is running out of money, and that's forcing the fund to cut future payments by up to 70%. Administrators say with tens of thousands of claims still outstanding, they have no choice. Brian Yennis joins us now with more. Brian.
John, look, the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund was set up in 2011 to compensate those who are now sick and dying because of their exposure to toxic dust breathed in the aftermath of the collapse of the World Trade Center. The number of deaths from 9/11 related illnesses is now nearing the number of those killed in the attacks, and by 2021, it is predicted to surpass 3,000. Congress gave the Victim Compensation Fund $7.3 billion to pay victims who file before December 18, 2020. The fund, however, is dwindling fast. So far, $5 billion has been spent on 21,000 claims, leaving just $2.3 billion to compensate 20,000 pending claims awaiting an award and thousands more who are expected to file a claim in the next 2 years. There's not enough money, so the fund is slashing payouts. All pending claims filed before February 1st will receive payouts slashed by 50%, and all claims filed after February 1st will get payments cut by 70%.
We are painfully aware that this is inequitable. We are hopeful that despite the difficult situation, the work that we do can continue to provide at least some measure of needed relief.
Now, fund administrators say the need for compensation has been far greater than they projected. 2018 saw a record number of claims filed, and cancer rates are higher than ever. As of September of 2018, more than 10,000 claimants had at least one form of cancer, a 34% increase in just 1 year. Those affected include residents and children who lived around Ground Zero in Manhattan, and firefighters, police officers, construction workers, and volunteers who were helping in the recovery efforts.
Not a day goes by without 10 to 15 new people in the 9/11 community calling me up and saying, Mike, can you help me? I have cancer. We asked them to go in and help people, and now we're telling them, too bad, you're out of luck. We didn't provide enough money. Well, that's not the way America should act.
New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and Colorado Senator Cory Gardner plan to introduce legislation this week, John, to permanently fund the VCF so this fight doesn't have to happen again.
What a story. Brian Yennis, thank you. The Islamic State now holds just 1 square mile of land in Syria, but a U.S.-backed Syrian militia says ISIS is keeping 1,000 Syrian civilians from leaving that area. Their fate is a growing concern as the U.S. gets ready to withdraw troops from the nation. Trey Yingst has more from our Jerusalem bureau.
John, the ISIS caliphate is days from being completely defeated, according to Syrian Democratic fighters. But Syria now faces a new challenge, deciding what to do with the hundreds of foreign ISIS prisoners currently being held by U.S.-backed Kurdish forces. Kurdish and SDF forces have cornered ISIS fighters in the city of Baghouz to a single neighborhood. While intense fighting continues, the final ISIS pocket in Iraq and Syria is expected to be destroyed by the end of the week. An SDF spokesperson said today that the last ISIS fighters are holding an estimated 1,000 civilians, making it hard for their forces to liberate the last stretch of land. Meanwhile, European governments are deciding how to prosecute their own citizens who went to join ISIS before the group was mostly destroyed. The topic was discussed this weekend at the Munich Security Conference, and President Trump tweeted overnight about the stance of the United States on this issue, saying, quote, "The United States is asking Britain, France, Germany, and other European allies to take back over 800 ISIS fighters that we captured in Syria and put them on trial. The caliphate is ready to fall. The alternative is not a good one, in that we will be forced to release them." Speaking today, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad talked about the effect of ISIS and the country's civil war on Syrian civilians. Assad failed to acknowledge his role in the humanitarian disaster.
The Syrians have suffered terribly in the war, and we do not forget that part of the suffering was due to terrorism imposed on us by the displacement of millions of Syrians outside the country.
As Western leaders debate how to handle foreign ISIS fighters currently being held by U.S.-backed forces, the fate of northern Syria remains open as multiple forces claim ownership to the same land. John?
Trey Yingst reporting. Trey, thank you. Another strange twist in the alleged hate crime reported by Empire cast member Jussie Smollett. Why Chicago police now say he is no longer considered a victim. Plus, fallout continues from bombshell comments by former FBI Deputy Director, Andrew McCabe, about discussions inside the Justice Department to possibly remove President Trump from office.
As a conspiracy starts to unravel, sometimes the co-conspirators turn on one another, and you get inconsistent testimony. Andy McCabe's testimony is inconsistent with his boss, Jim Comey. McCabe's testimony is also inconsistent with Rod Rosenstein.
The idea is if the president committed obstruction of justice, fired the director of the FBI to negatively impact or to shut down our investigation of Russia's malign activity and possibly in support of his campaign, as a counterintelligence investigator, you have to ask yourself, why would a president of the United States do that?
That's former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe roiling Washington and the nation with comments about the Justice Department allegedly discussing the potential removal of President Trump under the 25th Amendment. Hello, I'm John Scott, and this is the Fox Report. It's the bottom of the hour, and if you're just joining us, McCabe made those remarks in an interview on 60 Minutes. He says Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein even spoke with some cabinet members in Trump's administration about the idea. Let's bring in Kelly Jane Torrance, senior editor for The Washington Examiner. These are remarks that really have all of Washington and much of the nation buzzing tonight, Kelly.
They are, aren't they, John? And let's face it, Andrew McCabe is going to sell a lot of books based on them. I think that's one important thing to look at in deciding, do we believe what Andrew McCabe says, and do we think that he's telling the truth and presenting all the relevant facts? This guy was fired. He's been completely silent since then. If he was very concerned about what was going on in the White House, you'd think he would have said something. But no, he waited until he had written his book and had a book to sell. And of course, all of his remarks are coming on the eve of his book coming out this Tuesday. So I have to say I take what he says with a bit of grain of salt, because of course he has an incentive to, exaggerate, to trump up things, so to speak. I have to say, given that the guy was fired from the FBI for being misleading, I think we have to look very carefully at what he's saying.
Right, because the Inspector General of the Department of Justice said that he was involved in an unauthorized leak, and when investigators talked to him about it, he lied to them.
Yeah, it's you know, the facts of that case are really quite something. It was at least 4 different occasions that he misled investigators. And it wasn't just that, you know, he had unauthorized leaks to the media that he was trying to lie about. He actually specifically sent them in another direction. He actually tried to get innocent people in trouble. He suggested it was another office that had done leaks, and he actually wasted investigators' time by pointing them in that direction. They spent time investigating those people who were completely innocent before realizing it was Andrew McCabe, and he had been lying the entire time. So again, you know, when someone was fired for lying, and of course he doesn't put it that way, he likes to claim he was fired because President Trump didn't like the things he was saying. Well, that in itself is a lie, and I think somebody who is lying this many times and about this many things, including to FBI investigators, this is someone who, it strikes me, is willing to bend the truth and to even lie. I have to say, I wonder what he's saying, what's true and what's not.
Mark Penn has written an op-ed piece on FoxNews.com, and I would point our viewers to it. I want to read part of it to you. He writes, Justice Department and FBI officials spied on U.S. citizens with false warrants, gave a pass to one presidential campaign with a predetermined investigation, investigated another political campaign on the basis of no verified evidence, and illegally leaked information on investigations. They discussed wiretapping and using the 25th Amendment to the Constitution to remove President Trump, and appointed a special counsel as a retaliatory move for Comey's firing. Now, viewers who might not know Mark Penn, he is not a raging Republican firebrand. He is a guy who was the chief strategist for Bill Clinton's campaign in 1996 and Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2008.
Yeah, you know, I read that op-ed, and I have to say, in the middle of it, I actually had to look to make sure, wait, is this the Mark Penn? The Mark Penn who has been working for Clinton's for years, and it is. And, you know, here's someone who, you know, he's not letting his political views blind him. And I think that, again, you know, something, you know, the FISA warrants, wiretapping, I mean, this is something that every American should be concerned about. This is not about just, hey, some guys fighting at very high levels. Things like that, you know, every American citizen should be worried about whether the government can fairly or illegally wiretap them and have warrants on them with really no reason. So I have to say I commend Mark Penn for writing that, and I think that the fact that someone who is very close to the Clintons is concerned, really should say something. There's very few people, I think, out there who think that Andrew McCabe is a honorable guy who is always telling the truth. I think everybody knows that this guy, you know, he's not, he's one of the FBI bad apples. And I would say, I think most of the people at the FBI, great people, but it's people like Andrew McCabe that make Americans wonder what is going on behind closed doors at the nation's highest law enforcement office.
Of course, the Mueller investigation was born as a result of Andrew McCabe's concerns, among others. That Mueller investigation has now gone on basically a year longer than he said it would, and we still don't know the answers. Listen to Adam Schiff talking about what happens when that report is released.
We're going to have to do our own investigation, and we are. We'll certainly be very interested to learn what Bob Mueller finds. We may have to fight to get that information. Bill Barr has not been willing to commit to provide that report either to the Congress or to the American people. We're going to need to see it. The American people are going to need to see it.
So he is saying, I think, that the Democratic-led House and his committee is going to continue the investigation if they don't like what Bob Mueller reports?
Yeah, that's kind of surprising, isn't it, John? I mean, Democrats have been some of the people who have been saying, let's see what Bob Mueller comes up with. Let's see what he's doing. And, of course, they have also been talking about how honorable a guy Bob Mueller is and how good a team his investigators are. They have constantly been defending Bob Mueller, and I think rightfully so, in the face of some attacks by people on the other side. So it is very surprising for them to suggest that Robert Mueller and his team might not be doing a great job. I personally think let's wait and see what Mueller has. That is one of the only offices in Washington these days that is not leaking. So we don't know exactly what they're going to find, but everything they've done so far has been on the up and up. And I'm really shocked to hear a Democratic leader suggest otherwise. I mean, it's unbelievable to me that that the House would do a better investigation than Robert Mueller and his team. I mean, this guy has access to the best lawyers in the business. So I can't imagine Adam Schiff's going to do a better job than Bob Mueller.
And he spent a lot of money in the process. Kelly Jane Torrance, Washington Examiner. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
New evidence and another bizarre